How's it going, guys? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting, and welcome back to House of Fata Morgana Reincarnation, or at least the preludes to it, because we're doing all the side stories first, because they could add a lot of context, Reincarnation being like the most recent thing to come out that's in this lineup. So, yeah, we did Pain last time, which I thought, because it's like, there's like number 1, Lost, and 2, Pain, I thought they would be succeeding from one another, but no. It turned out that Lost was like a continuation of the fourth door. Pain was a continuation after one of the bad endings, where Morgana kind of gets cheated out of her own mansion by Giselle, when Giselle essentially turns her despair into being a witch herself. So, oh boy, that was a spicy ending. I really liked it though. Anyway, so we're gonna start with Boy Meets Girl, and I'm guessing these are gonna be a little shorter, so we might be able to slap 2 of them down tonight, but we'll have to see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all these, so we got a ways to go. Let's just jump right in and get started. Okay, here we go. Boy Meets Girl. Michel was bored out of his mind. His family had always been very overprotective, but at the age of 10, he was still afforded a lot of freedom. He wasn't quite old enough to have us start acting like an adult yet, and in light of what fate had in store for him much later, this would turn out to be one of the happier periods of his life. Even as a child, Michel understood his place within the Bollinger family. He was obedient and did his best not to step on anyone else's toes. But bottling up his desire for so long put them at risk of blowing up. Especially on days like this, where there was an opening. His mother, who said, "Listen to your mother," as though it were part of her breathing, just so happened to be out of the house. So he wanted to do something different, to let out all his pent-up boredom. He wanted to make this day into the day he would remember. And since his mother had taken many of the servants with her, there was no one to get on his case if he acted out a bit. However, he had no idea what to do with his newfound free time. It was just drifting past him, every passing moment another moment wasted. I'll just have to ask Georges. He may have been a precocious child, but Michel was still a child nonetheless. And he genuinely believed his brother would have some idea of what to do. If his eldest brother Dieter had been around, Michel could have gone to play with chess with him or watched him train, but regrettably his eccentric middle brother was home. 10 days earlier, Georges had proclaimed he was going to paint a masterpiece. Michel hadn't seen him since. Maybe he was dead. That would kind of suck. just a smidge. Michel didn't want to have to deal with reporting a body. Though, in all seriousness, his brother was probably just his special place, and had lost track of time. Michel made his way to his brother's room, a process that would usually involve running into a half-dozen servants, but today, the Bollinger estate was quiet as a graveyard. He felt like humming as he walked through the corridors, but couldn't think of any songs. If only he wasn't so ignorant about the arts and recreation, maybe he wouldn't be such a horribly boring person. But today, Michel wasn't in the mood for those kinds of depressing thoughts. He stood before the door of his brother's room, knocked timidly, then let himself in. "Hey, Georges, do you have..." he said, but he was unable to finish the sentence. His brother was splayed out on the floor like a corpse. He really had found a body. Michel stood in the doorway, frozen and useless like one of his brother's sculptures. The air in the room was stale from having been closed for so long. That was like a full page of text. We haven't seen that in a while. "Georges?" After several long minutes, Michel was finally able to use his voice again. He ran over to the body, dropped to his knees, shaking his brother's shoulders, on the verge of tears. This was his punishment for saying it would suck to deal with a dead body. "Georges, please, come back to me! What happened?" "Ha! Ah!" The corpse lurched forward, causing a breeze that stunk of paint. Michel shuffled backwards on his knees, his heart pounding as hard so hard it felt like it would jump out of his chest. Georges gazed stupidly at his in-progress painting, heaving a heavy sigh. Are you okay, Georges? Maybe you should get some rest." "Ah, didn't see you there, Michel." Oh, so is it Michel? Okay, so this is back in the day. Okay, so this is when Michel, we know he's male, but he still appears and talks feminine, so I'll try and do that again. Michel wanted to disappear. He felt like an idiot for getting so worked up over someone who only to have them see straight past him. That's all you have to say after worrying me like that. Huh? I was just sleeping. Nothing to worry about. Your bed's for sleeping, not the floor. Oh, go away. There you go. George's chortle. Did you need something? Oh, yes, Michel said. Mother and most of the servants are out of the house for the day. There's some kind of trouble? No, no trouble. George tilted his head until it was almost horizontal. A few moments later, he clapped loudly and said, Aha! So you're bored. He was right, but Michel didn't want to bring himself to just say, Yes, I'm bored, please give me attention. So he averted his eyes and said instead, I would not say I'm bored, but it's just so rare for the house to be so empty, and I... Georges chuckled. You're right, he said with an impish smirk. Michel braced himself, fearing his brother was going to tease him. We all need a change of pace every once in a while. Some real excitement to mix things up. I've been running short on inspiration these last few days, too. So he was not ready for what his brother said instead. Let's go out on the town, Georges proclaimed. At which Michel was positively bug-eyed. Now, this is a point that bears repeating. Michel's family was very overprotective of him. In part because he was so sensitive to the sun, but mostly because he was a daughter of noble blood. He wasn't a vampire, so the sun wouldn't kill him, but because of the circumstances of his birth, he was almost never allowed to go into the city. If he was lucky, he got to go down once a year, but always for some kind of business. The city was like a giant cave filled with gold and jewels, but guarded by a big, ferocious, poisonous dragon that he could only see a little bit of. So he was thrilled. So much so that he had been raised with fewer hawks watching over him, he probably would have broken into dance and maybe even a musical number. But he never knew how to restrain himself. He knew how to restrain himself, and restrain himself he did. When they arrived at the capital's center district, it was much busier than Michel had expected. There were people everywhere, going every which way, doing anything and everything and even more. Someone was shouting from a shop, trying to attract customers. Their voice was rough, deep, and loud, nothing like the quietly refined voices of everyone at home. A cat sat perched atop a barrel covered in filth, glaring at Michel while his eyes seemed to glow. His mother would probably hate this. Her anxiety was too strong. She would say it was too loud and unrefined, refusing to even set foot here. But Michel thought there was beauty specifically in the discord. Georges laughed merrily at the sight of Michel looking around in wonder. Looks like we're in for even more excitement than we bargained for, Georges exclaimed. Is it not safe here in the city? Oh, heck no, it ain't. You let your guard down for 3 seconds and you're dead meat. Don't listen to anyone who says they have something good for you, hear me? 9 times out of 10, they're gonna toss you in a big black cauldron and eat you up. That's just how it is in the big city. What? Michel went pale as a ghost, and 3 seconds later, Georges burst out laughing. He'd been tricked. Michel flushed bright red. His cheeks were getting quite a workout today. If there's anyone I shouldn't listen to, it's you, Georges. I ain't lying, just playing a little joke, that's all. Only a little kid would fall for that. Haha. One of these days, Michel was going to get Georges back, beat him at his own game. This, his brother said, giving him a quick wink. This is the excitement I was talking about. He placed an outstretched finger on Michel's chest, right above his heart, and pushed gently. There's gonna be some real fireworks if anyone realizes who you are. He was right. Michel's mother would tear his head off if she found out her daughter was wandering around in a commoner's clothing. He wore a battered brown robe instead of an elaborate dress, and his hair was tied up and hidden inside a hat. At a glance, no one would clock him as a noble girl, but he still felt awkward and out of place. The people were more likely to notice that. Georges, meanwhile, had done this before. He really owned the commoner look. If Michel didn't know better, he'd think his brother was traveling troubadour or something. You really are a strange man, Georges. You just now figuring that out, kid? No, just... That's part of my charm. I hope one day I can be as confident as you. Georges was probably the only person in that house who considered trouble fun. If Michel had asked one of the servants to help sneak him into the city, they would have cleanly taken off, shouting about how they didn't want to lose their head. As a Bollinger himself, Georges would likely be allowed to keep his head, but even he wouldn't get off scot-free for this. Michel was glad he had Georges here with him. He didn't say that, though. Partly from embarrassment, and partly because he knew he'd be teased for it. This is just a sweet story so far. So, where should we go? Oh, so, where should we go? Wanna hit the pub, grab some cheap booze, and toss silver at the bard? Maybe we should ease into things. That's a lot to start with. It's not like I'm taking you to Monster's Den. Just relax, it'll be fun. A pub's still no place for children. Come on, I may be a dunce, but I'm not dumb enough to take you to some seedy back alley joint. Most of the pubs along the main road are basically restaurants during the day. Some even have inns in them. There'll be lots of very nice people. If you say so. Michel was less comforted and more terrified at the prospect of there being lots of people, but part of him was still interested. Not to mention he wouldn't be going alone, so he gave a hesitant nod. If you're scared, you can always hold my hand, Georgia said. Forward march, my young soldier, follow my lead. Michel wasn't happy about his sprightly, air-headed brother playing him like a fiddle, but this was the battle his pride couldn't win. Holding onto his brother's pant leg, they set off down the bustling street together. But not for long. Michel stood flummoxed in the middle of the street. He looked left, no Georges. Right, no Georges. Oh, fetch, really? It didn't take long. He had gotten lost? No way. He had been right there just moments ago. There was just too many people around. He lost sight of his brother for a second. He wasn't lost yet. Michel's brother was better than that. He would never get lost. But his pride couldn't change reality. They were on their way to the pub when Georges had run into a girl he knew and started talking. It didn't seem like they were going to finish anytime soon, so Michel decided to wander around and explore the area. One thing led to another, and now he'd completely lost sight of his brother. Refusing to accept that he was lost, Michel started chasing after people of the same height and build as Georges. When one turned out to be the wrong, he went after another, and another. Before he knew it, he was well off the main road and had no idea how to get back. Oof. Makes sense, though. For a 10-year-old, I don't blame you. That's kind of what instincts would tell you to do. This area was much quieter than the main street. Not being familiar with cities, Michel couldn't tell if it was a good kind of quiet or a bad one, though. Maybe he just wandered off of the trade district to the residential one. Or maybe he'd ended up in some back alley where no one could hear him scream. If the latter, he needed to get out of there fast. Back alleys were the homes of ruffians and other unseemly types, after all. And who knew what they would do if they found out he was a noble? That, compounded with the fact that he was too shy to ask for help and too self-conscious to let himself be seen crying or even shaking, left him stuck there, just biting his lip. Why did none of my books say what to Why did none of my books say what to do when you get lost? As soon enough, he was directing his frustration at innocent bystanders. But then, he caught sight of a stout woman around his mother's age watching him intently. 9 times out of 10, they're gonna toss you in a big black cauldron and eat you right up. George's words played in the back of Michel's mind. He knew it was a lie, and the woman appeared rather friendly, not at all like a child-devouring witch, but Michel was all alone right now, so everyone seemed dangerous. He was like a high-strung cat. Michel glared back at the woman, and she knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. And as soon as they locked eyes, she spoke. He couldn't make any sense of what she said, though. Ma, look at you two little sweethearts. Shopping together? You're so grown up. What? 2 little sweethearts? Was she trying to disorient him by spouting nonsense so she could kidnap him with his guard down and demand a ransom from his family? Hey, mister, came a voice as something tugged on his robe. He spun around to find a small girl looking up at him and sucking her thumb, evidently the source of the voice. Who are you? She asked. No, who are you? He stared at her flummoxed for the second time that day. Interesting. My daddy got lost, the girl said. I think you mean you got lost. Are you lost too, mister? No, it's my brother who's lost. We're the same. My situation is nowhere near as bad as yours, thank you. Michel listened to what the girl had to say, doing his best not to explode at her. She was apparently 3 years old and had gotten separated from her father while out shopping. Oh, fetch, man. That's terrifying to think about. His hands were full enough trying to figure out what to do with himself. The last thing he needed was to have a look after a lost toddler on top of that. He really should have asked a woman for help as soon as he'd noticed her, but by the time he'd collected himself enough to do anything, she'd already said goodbye and disappeared. Unable to find her again, Michel was struck dealing with the calamity all on his own. He couldn't just leave her there either, as much as he didn't want to deal with it. He was just the older one here, and he had to set a good example for her. So Michel bent down and matched the girl's eye level and said, "Let's get you home. I'll help you find it." Can you remember anything near your home that might help us find it?" Michel asked. The girl did for several minutes before shouting, "Oh, I do!" "Perfect. What is it?" Maybe this whole lost kid ordeal would be over sooner than expected. He let out a sigh of relief. "A brown cat." Which immediately turned into a sigh of disappointment. "Cats move," Michel said. "It has really mean eyes." Oh, forget about the cat already. Can you think of anything that doesn't move? I know. Monsieur Casimir is always sitting outside. No people either. Oh, why not? He never ever moves from his favorite spot. I need something easier to find, like a building or something. "Oh, there are lots of buildings," the girl exclaimed. "The lady next door has a big flower garden. They're really pretty and red." "Not like that. No one's going to know about your neighborhood's flower garden. There has to be something big that anyone would..." Michel realized he was getting genuinely angry and stopped himself there. The girl's eyes had gotten wide and watery, and it looked like the dam could burst at any second. He closed his eyes and shook his head, disappointed in himself. Here he was, getting mad at a 3-year-old girl who was just doing her best to answer his questions. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. No, I'm not mad at you." Michel took a deep breath, letting it out slowly to release some of his frustration. He needed to adjust his expectations. She was just a little kid, and she wasn't always going to know the right thing to say. What am I supposed to do then? He'd been raised in almost complete isolation from the world, with only adults around to interact with. Even his brothers were a good deal older than him, so he'd never been in a situation where there would be so many barriers to communication. And he was utterly clueless as to how to handle it. Would he actually be able to help the girl get home? "Gems!" the girl said out of nowhere, interrupting Michel's train of thought. She reached her soft, pudgy little hand up and patted his cheeks with it, right beneath his eye, at which he froze, dumbstruck. One second she was on the verge of tears, the next her eyes were glimmering inquisitively. What was she even talking about? Where did gems come from? This is just how little kids are, I guess. I wonder if I was like this at her age, too. "Do your eyes hurt?" she asked. "Huh? Why would they?" "Because you've got gems in them." Oh, so that's what she meant. His red eyes. Michel understood now, but he wasn't very thrilled about the topic. He didn't like the color of his eyes, or his hair, or his skin. It was all because of them that he had to be holed up his whole life. "That's just what color my eyes are. There's no gems in them, and it doesn't hurt." "Wow, they're so pretty." Pretty? Michel blushed a little at the compliment, despite thinking just moments ago he'd rather talk about literally anything else. He received compliments on his eyes often enough from his mother and the servants, but this was the first time one had ever felt genuine, with nothing behind it. When his mother said his eyes were pretty, she was envisioning him as an angel sent down to earth. When the servants did, it was because of their status. They were never saying it about him and only him. But the goodest girl, she was. There was no jealousy or pity or scorn or anything else in her words. She was simply excited about eyes she thought were pretty. I think normal eyes are much prettier myself," he said without a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "Okay, let's go somewhere where there's more people to start with," he continued. Michel stood up, hesitated for a few moments, and then extended his hand. The girl grabbed it excitedly, which made him feel like he was the only one anxious about this whole thing. "I'll come with you, mister. You need someone to help you find your brother." "You're the one who got lost, remember? Wait, mister? Right?" Michel just now realized she'd been calling him Mister this entire time. He'd forgotten that George had dressed him up like a boy, saying it was safer that way. How was he supposed to feel in this situation? Upset that she'd guessed wrong? Embarrassed? Ashamed of himself for deceiving her? The emotion that welled up in his chest was none of those, though. Instead, Michel felt something that seemed entirely inexplicable at the time, a mixture of joy and pride at someone finally acknowledging him for who he was. A faint smile spread across his face. "Yes, I'm a boy," he said, letting each word linger on his lips. It felt so much better than any comment about his eyes. That's cool. They wound their way down the street, Michel occasionally working up the courage to ask someone for directions, and after repeating the process several times, they finally made it back to the main road. Michel wasn't sure if that was the same road where he'd gotten separated from George's, though. The capital was massive, and it seemed like every other street was called Main Street. As they stepped out into the throng, the clock struck noon. The pealing of the bell brought with it another wave of people. They looked to be artisans of sorts, heading out for their lunch breaks. Apparently, this main street collected a bunch of workshops on it. The artisans were all big men with even bigger arms. Their profession, making things by hand, you had to be well built to do the job well. Michel found himself enchanted by the parade of muscles, following each new one with his eyes as they passed by. Do you want to be like them, mister? I don't know. I haven't really thought about my future much. Michel grimaced. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it, but that he didn't want to. He knew all too well he could never be an artisan, or a knight, or even a painter. I kind of want to be a craftsman, the girl said. They can make anything they want. Girls can't be craftsmen. Why not? Well, that was just how the world worked. Those were the rules, and you had to follow. The end of story. Michel was only 10, and he knew that. He knew what a girl's role was, and soon enough, she would come to know all that as well. That growing up meant giving up on your dreams. I'm not sure, actually. At first, he just didn't want to shatter the 3-year-old girl's hopes, but the more he thought about it, the more dissatisfied he felt with the system, too. Why didn't he get to choose how to live his own life? Why did he have to be stuck on this dark and narrow road his whole life? What would you want to make as a craftsman? Michel asked, taking his mind off his own dead-end future. The girl's eyes lit up. Leather sandals and bags, she proclaimed. That's quite practical. He had assumed she would say something more cute and frivolous, like toys or sweets, or even something completely outrageous, like stars. So we could put them out. Put them out? Not put them on? Wait, was she? Does your family run a shop? Yep. Okay, so she was the daughter of a merchant, which meant they were probably close. The artisan's workshop and the merchant's shops were likely to be set up near one another. Michel looked down and asked her if she recognized anything in this area. But before he could, she shouted, "Ah!" and let go of his hand, dashing. "Oh, fetch! I skipped! How do I go back? Take me back? No. Hey, wait!" Oh, well, she dashed off into the crowd. Hey, wait! If he lost sight of her now, he'd probably never find the girl again. So he ran off after her, slamming into the large, muscular man only a few seconds later. "Watch it!" the man shouted, his voice so powerful Michel thought it might send him flying. His gut tightened. No one had ever yelled at him like that before, but he wasn't going to stop just because he got a little scared. He'd only met the girl earlier the day, he didn't even know her name, but he was determined to get her back to her parents. Giving up now wasn't an option for him. The girl weaved through the crowd effortlessly, like a sprite out of the story. Meanwhile, Michel was crashing into people every 3 steps and was beginning to fear he was actually making negative progress. At long last, he made it through the river of people and caught sight of her again. But what he saw made his jaw drop. She charged at an older man, latching onto his leg. The man looked down at her, his eyes narrowed as if he was frowning, or about to start crying. He was very clearly the girl's father. In addition to his relief at their reunion, he also found himself surprised at the father's reaction. His only image of a father was a strict and impassive man, not someone who would show so much concern and compassion for his daughter. His father cared more about putting on an appearance of strength than showing love for his family. He would certainly never cry over one of his kids. That would make him look weak. And Michel had always thought that was just how fathers were. But there was nothing weak about this girl's father being so happy to have her back. Aww, it's so heartwarming. Are you the one who found my little pumpkin? Her father walked over to where Michel was standing, grabbed both of his hands and shook them up and down enthusiastically. Thank you ever so much. I just about had a heart attack when I saw she was gone. Oh, I'm so glad she's safe, he said, and then kept on going until Michel felt like his arms were going to come off. You're welcome. That's enough. When the man finally let him go, Michel's arms had gone numb. I'm ever so sorry, he said, scratching his head in embarrassment. I got too excited. The girls hanging off his father's leg like a koala said, Don't get lost anymore, Daddy. You're the one who got lost, Pumpkin, he said with a sigh. But he was too relieved to be angry at her, and his frown turned right upside down. Michel let out a satisfied sigh at the sight of them. He'd completed his mission successfully, despite the trouble he'd run into along the way, and everything was all back to normal now. So, did you bring her here all by yourself? The man asked. Everything was all back to normal, in the sense that he was finally back at square one. He still had his original problem to deal with. I was here with my brother, he said timidly, but we got split up. See, I knew you were lost, mister, the girl said. He wanted to say he knew exactly where he was, but he knew an adult would see right through him. So he stared down at his feet in shame, at which her father let out a hearty laugh and set his hand on his head. Well, I'll help you find your brother then. He's probably having a heart attack right about now too. He's not worried, Michel said under his breath, but secretly he hoped the girl's father was right. Michel told the girl's dad they were going to a pub on the main street, and just a few minutes later they were standing across the street from it. It was amazing how much quicker it was when you had someone who knew the area to show you the way, and it made Michel feel much worse about the time he'd spent wandering through the back streets. Like Georges had said, the pub acted like a restaurant during the day, and it was packed to the brim with men in their lunch breaks. Eating had always been a quiet affair in Michel's life, so this was a brand new experience for him. It felt like he'd come to a festival. Before long, they caught sight of a man pacing back and forth in front of the building. It was his brother, Georges. And when he spotted Michel, he frantically ran over shouting, Michel! So frantically, in fact, he tripped over his own feet and face-planted halfway there. But the bigger of the fool Georges made of himself, the happier it made Michel. What'd I tell you? The girl father said, patting him on the shoulder. Georges? Yeah? After things had settled down, they'd parted ways with the girl and his father. Georges and Michel sat down for a late lunch. It was a very primitive meal, consisting of thin pieces of torn meat placed on slices of bread and eaten with only your hands. It's just a sandwich. Michel was having a great deal of difficulty with it. Were you worried about me? He asked, trying to be as casual as possible. Georges took a swig of some watery wine to wash down what he'd had in his mouth and pounded his chest a few times. He swallowed, opened his mouth, and let out an impressively colossal belch. Michel had never seen his brother act so unrefined, but apparently that kind of behavior was allowed here. It seemed to even be the norm. The heck you talking about, kid? Of course I was. Just about had a heart attack when I saw you were gone. That was more excitement than you signed up for, huh? Mother'd be very unhappy with you. I mean, yeah, I didn't want to go through that another one of her lectures, Georges said with a strained smile. He looked softer and more affectionate than his usual vivacious self. But mostly I was scared something would happen to you, Michel. Michel's hand froze in midair, holding a piece of meat on bread thing. I thought you just laughed it off if you lost me, honestly. What do you think I am, some kind of cold-hearted monster? I'm just joking, Michel said, sneaking a peek at his brother's pouting face over his meat. He wanted to give a nice hearty laugh, but the most he could manage was a restrained smile. And for a child who didn't smile much at all, he'd gone quite a bit of that day. Hey, Georges? Yeah. I'm sorry for disappearing on you like that. George's jaw dropped. Well, I'll be damned. I never thought I'd hear you apologize for anything, Michel. What do you think I am, some kind of emotionless hobgoblin? I'm just pulling your leg. I'm sorry for not keeping a better eye on you two. Maybe if you weren't so busy looking at every single girl we walked past, you wouldn't have been a problem. Come on, don't trust a knife. That's where we're supposed to hung and say, yeah, we both messed up. George put his face in his hands and faked crying for a few seconds. And while he looked up again, he had a big smile on his face, which put a little bit of one on Michel's as well. His father would never panic like that, no matter what happened to Michel. He was too concerned about appearances. But his brother was different. George just got scared for him, almost cried for him, panicked so much he made a complete fool of himself. And that was enough. Michel didn't have to be jealous of the girl as his father. He had his family loved him too. And he was happy he'd had the chance to see for himself. Hey, Georges. Yeah. Let's do this again sometime. Heck yeah! Next time Mom and Dad and our scary big brother are out, let's go. It was extremely rare that they were all out of the house at the same time, so it was possible there would never be a next time. But Michel still dreamed of the day it would happen. Even if it was a few years from now, as long as this wasn't the last time, he would be happy. And when he came back, he would go see that girl again. He'd go find her family shop, and if there was a pair of leather sandals and a bag for sale, he'd buy them. And then he'd ask the girl what her name was. Would she even remember him in a few years? Would he even remember her in a few years? In all likelihood, neither of them would remember this day, but a little dream didn't hurt anyone. He could still feel her soft hands in his. And he could still see her big, inquisitive eyes. Like two little balls of glimmering jade. I thought it would be implying that. Yeah. A little cameo saying that they happened to cross paths with Giselle and managed to meet him. Ah, it's adorable. Fairly unlikely and very impractical, but freaking adorable. Alright, that was pretty short. I think we'll start the next one. I doubt we'll be able to finish it because, like, I'm only going to probably go for another 30 minutes max. But hey, you know, maybe it'll be another short one and we'll be able to get it done. So, Silent Night, Lonely Night. Oh, back to Michel. Old Michel. Silent Night, Lonely Night. Michel was even gloomier than usual. His ruby eyes gazed down at the letter from his mother. If it were a year prior, he would have been crying or shouting, throwing furniture, but nowadays, I rarely saw him explode into anything. And I preferred him this way. Getting loud and emotional over every little thing that was ordinary men did, but beneath Michel's gypsum skin flowed blood divine as mine. He was above them, and it did not benefit him to behave as they did. Brooding in silence was much more appropriate behavior, so this is Morgana's perspective. I sat at the desk beside him, my chin resting on my hand. Michel could not see me there, though. Not that I wanted to watch him grimace in disgust at the horrifying scars on my face, of course. Michel, my dear. What? That was unexpected. He almost never responded to me anymore. Perhaps he wanted someone to speak with in his present tribulation. Michel briefly looked around the room for me, but no matter how hard he searched, his eyes would never find mine. You should hang it up, I said. Are you out of your mind? I'm just teasing you. I gave a little laugh, agitating him further. Today his family had sent him Christmas decorations. First a handmade, probably by his mother, white floral wreath, a lovely thing that a young girl might like. Then there was a doll in frilly clothes, also intended for a girl. I expected Michel to toss it all in the fireplace this evening, but merely destroying it wouldn't erase the fact that he'd received it. Nor that his mother would be expecting a response, not from Michel, but from Michel. Despite my repeatedly asking her not to, my mother continues to send me these Christmas boxes as it gets cold. I'm starting to hate even the thought of Jesus Christ. You should direct your anger at your family, not the Holy Savior. Yes, I realize it's misplaced, but... You could easily solve this with a curse. Just say the word. And you need to stop offering me that. As you wish. Michel had changed a great deal since his first arrival at the mansion, but that was one thing he stubbornly refused to budge on. Did he really care about his family that much? He seemed to have drawn a line in the sand and convinced himself that if he stepped over it, he would be surrendering his humanity. But what he needed to realize was that he never had any to lose in the first place, so his concern was entirely irrelevant. It would spare him the lecture today, though. He was busy racking himself over the letter and Christmas. Michel. What? Having grown tired of resting my chin on my hand, I was now sitting on top of the desk looking down at him. Again, he looked around for me, with no luck. Tell me about Christmas. Your family lives on a rather large estate, don't they? Larger than this little mansion, at least. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's just... talking about when I was happy only makes me feel even worse now. I can understand that, I suppose. Michel had Michel ever been happy? My family was too poor to put up Christmas decorations to do anything special for Epiphany. What gifts did we did receive from the villagers all went straight to my mother, and I saw none of it. Though earthly desires were wrong, I believed, so was hardly bothered by that. I was one who gave to those in need, after all. Michel, my dear. What? He glanced slightly upward. So close, but still not quite able to find me. Just saying your name. He appeared mildly annoyed, but didn't say anything in protest. Perhaps he thought this wouldn't make a difference, or had simply gotten used to me calling his name for the sake of it. Regardless, he reluctantly dropped his gaze back to the letter on the desk. I decided to leave him alone. He didn't seem willing to share his Christmas experiences, and I had nothing else to talk about. Morgana. Yes. That caught me off guard. Michel almost never initiated. I tilted my head, even though I knew he couldn't see it. Do you, he said, want to celebrate Christmas? Is that it? Had he lost his mind? At what point had I ever said I wanted to celebrate the holiday? While I was busy being flabbergasted, Michel stood up and took the wreath in his hand. He then began searching the area for me. Where are you?
Right here.
That doesn't help me. Where's your head? Am I close? He asked, waving his hand around in the air.
That's my shoulder, I said, still not concerned what he was trying to do.
How about here?
A little higher.
Here?
Yes, right there.
Holding one hand there in the air, he took the other, the one holding the wreath, and brought it up to the same level, placing it right above my head. An awkward silence hung in the air for a few seconds as I failed to grasp what had just happened. Wreaths in my family were worn as headdresses. When I made one, I would place it on my mother's head, like this. They're gifts for the women of the house. I'm glad you're here, so I could pretend this was a gift for you instead.
What are you?
You asked about my family's Christmas.
No, that wasn't what I meant.
Why was he doing this? He went quiet for a moment, then smiled, which was all the answer I needed. It was a very self-defeating smile, not meant for me. Laughing at himself for putting so much weight on only one whose wreath's potential, weight on only one of the wreath's potential meanings. In sorrow for the family who refused to accept him. I made a very similar smile. Flowers would never benefit me after all. Not with one arm violently severed and the other nothing but bone. I could never be the innocent little girl laughing with flowers in her hair.
I have no interest in your wreath. Throw it in the fire.
That's probably for the best, yes. And what we learned in that moment was that Christmas would never be a happy occasion for us. That said, it was better than I'd expected nonetheless. We shared a certain energy there, staring in silence. A solitary, capitulatory, desolate energy.
Michel, my dear.
What? I turned up to look at him, wreath still in his hand, as he looked down and turned, this time matching my gaze exactly. He wasn't really looking into my eyes, though. He just happened to know where they were because I had told him. But I was fine with that.
Would you like me to write that letter to your mother in your stead?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I mean, I dictate what you will say. All you have to do is write it down and sign it, Michel. It won't be something you wrote, so I imagine doing that will take much of the pressure off.
He didn't seem certain what to make of this proposal. I'd never suggested anything like it before, and I likely never would again. You're going to ask me for something in return, aren't you?
Of course not. What do you think I am?
A witch. Well, he was right, but Michel was a saint like me, so I wasn't particularly fond of him calling me a witch. I was in a forgiving mood today, though, so I decided to let it pass.
I know how to show gratitude. Thank you very much. Even for a wildly ill-considered floral wreath.
I was just fickle, that was all. Sometimes I would have days like this. Most I would continue trying to bring him over to my side to curse his family. But occasionally, I would show some kindness.
Merry Christmas, Michel.
That was a depressing Christmas. Fetch me, man. Alright, well, that was a lot shorter than I thought, but I think that is where we're going to stop for today. We got Scarlet in the coffee house and a ghost of an excuse, but it does seem like things are picking up pace quite a lot. We were able to smack out 2 of them. Let's see, so we got these 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9 for the Revenant stream for the finale before we start Resurrection. So, yeah, we got a lot going still, but I'm excited to continue to do these stories with you guys. What did you think of those 2 short stories? I thought Boys v Girl was cute, but it almost felt a little too idealistic in a way. Like, it kind of makes sense that Giselle was from around the area, but I got the impression she was supposed to be from a different city. Maybe they were supposed to be visiting, I don't know, but like, it was a cute like rendezvous, but it does make sense why they cut that story in particular, because it's so like, it's such a side story. I think the most impactful thing about that story was actually Michel's realization that he always felt like a boy, and like having that first self-actualization of it was a pretty cool thing to see. And then Silent Night, Lonely Night, just a super small Christmas story for Morgana and Michel. Mostly just showing again their dynamic, and also kind of showing at the hints of like Morgana's thought process, because we don't get to see things from her perspective very much. So seeing how she thought of herself as a saint even when she was a witch was very interesting. It's kind of this like odd dichotomy, and why I can almost believe in pain Giselle eventually surpassed her, because Giselle kind of was beaten more purely into something more akin to a witch, as opposed to Morgana, who kind of just accepted that role but never believed it of herself. I think Giselle believing herself to be a witch gave her a lot more power. But yeah, anyway. All right, that was pretty good. It was really fun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the episodes and continuing to explore these dynamic side stories and these side views, preparing ourselves for the grand finale of Reincarnation, which I'm pretty excited to get to, honestly. Like, I kind of wish we could just skip all of this stuff, but I also know I would hate myself if I did, so I want to get through all of it, and I'm going to enjoy it every step of the way. But thank you so much for being here, being able to spend your time with me. It means the world to me. Thank you so much, and thank you especially to the patrons who continue to support the channel directly. You guys are awesome. Got lots of exciting content coming up in the future. We're going to be finishing up Persona 5 here before too long. Like, God, I don't even know. I'm guessing that we're probably like only a month or two away from that, and then we're going to start probably one of our biggest projects besides the Higurashi series, which is going to be not Higurashi, what am I saying? It's like no, it is Higurashi and Omaneko. Yeah, like those are going to be a big beast of a series that we're going to be doing, but also the Trails in the Sky. If I have as much fun with the first Trails of the game as I'm thinking I will, like there's a good chance we're just going to blast through all of them, so that'll be fun. But anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and until next video watching me, I've seen me next. I'll see you there.